District Attorney Rachel Thompson wasn't just observing security procedures that day at Miami International Airport. But when airport police questioned her authority to evaluate their performance, their next court appearance would become the most humbling moment in law enforcement history. District Attorney Rachel Thompson moved through the bustling security checkpoint areas of Miami International Airport with the analytical focus of someone who had spent 18 years building one of the most respected prosecutorial careers in Florida, rising from assistant district attorney to elected district attorney for Miami-Dade County. Her expertise in criminal law, law enforcement oversight, and prosecutorial management had resulted in successful prosecution of thousands of criminal cases while establishing comprehensive police accountability programs that set statewide standards for constitutional compliance. At 47 years old, she carried herself with the judicial authority that comes from earning a Juris Doctor from University of Florida Law School with highest honors and developing expertise that qualified her to serve as chief prosecutor for one of the nation's largest metropolitan areas, with responsibility for overseeing criminal prosecutions and law enforcement performance evaluation throughout Miami-Dade County. Her credentials included membership in the National District Attorneys Association and board positions with the Florida Prosecuting Attorneys Association, establishing her as one of the leading authorities on criminal prosecution and law enforcement accountability in the Southeast. Today's unannounced evaluation visit was part of her comprehensive law enforcement oversight responsibilities, allowing her to assess police performance and constitutional compliance during routine security operations, without the artificial improvements that often occurred when officers knew they were being evaluated by prosecutorial authority. Her casual business attire reflected her preference for conducting unbiased performance evaluations, allowing her to observe actual police conduct rather than the enhanced performance that usually accompanied formal prosecutorial visits. Airport Police Officer David Martinez, a mid-level law enforcement officer with 5 years of airport security experience who had developed assumptions about civilian authority based on limited understanding of law enforcement hierarchy, observed Rachel's analytical assessment without recognizing the prosecutorial authority of someone who regularly made decisions affecting police careers and criminal prosecutions throughout the metropolitan area. Martinez's limited understanding of prosecutorial hierarchy and tendency to make judgments based on appearance led him to categorize Rachel as an ordinary civilian observer, despite the analytical focus she maintained during routine oversight visits. As Rachel continued her unannounced performance evaluation, she witnessed a systematic pattern of constitutional violations and professional misconduct by airport police officers conducting security procedures with obvious disregard for passenger rights and constitutional standards that she had spent years enforcing through criminal prosecutions and police accountability measures. Officer Martinez and his partner, Officer Jennifer Walsh, were subjecting passengers to unnecessary aggressive questioning, unconstitutional searches, and discriminatory treatment that clearly violated Fourth Amendment protections and departmental policies that Rachel's office had specifically designed to prevent such constitutional violations. "Sir, empty all your pockets and submit to additional screening because you look suspicious," Martinez demanded of an elderly passenger whose only apparent offense was appearing nervous during routine security procedures, demonstrating the type of discriminatory profiling that Rachel's prosecutorial office worked continuously to eliminate. Rachel immediately recognized the constitutional violations and professional misconduct, understanding from her extensive prosecutorial experience that such law enforcement techniques violated clearly established legal precedent and demonstrated exactly the type of police misconduct that required immediate intervention and potential criminal charges. "Officer Martinez," she said, while reading his name badge and approaching the security checkpoint with obvious authority. "I'm observing concerning constitutional violations and improper police procedures that require immediate attention and corrective action." Martinez looked at Rachel with immediate suspicion. Interpreting her observation of police misconduct as inappropriate civilian interference, rather than recognizing the obvious legal expertise and prosecutorial authority. "Ma'am, you need to move along and stop interfering with official police business," Martinez replied with obvious hostility that demonstrated his complete lack of understanding about prosecutorial oversight and law enforcement accountability requirements. "We don't need civilians telling us how to do our jobs or questioning our security procedures." Rachel observed Martinez's defensive response and continued misconduct with growing prosecutorial concern, understanding that such resistance to oversight demonstrated exactly the type of institutional problems that required comprehensive prosecutorial intervention. As Martinez and Walsh continued their pattern of constitutional violations, despite Rachel's initial intervention, she began systematic documentation of the law enforcement violations that would form the basis for potential criminal charges and departmental disciplinary actions against officers who demonstrated such clear disregard for constitutional requirements. "Officers Martinez and Walsh, your current procedures violate clearly established Fourth Amendment precedent and departmental policies," Rachel stated with prosecutorial authority and obvious legal expertise that should have immediately established her familiarity with law enforcement requirements and constitutional standards. "I am documenting these violations for appropriate legal action and administrative review through proper channels." Martinez responded to Rachel's legal assertions with increased hostility, apparently interpreting her knowledge of constitutional law as evidence of anti-police bias rather than recognizing the obvious prosecutorial expertise and professional authority. "Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you don't have any authority to evaluate our police work or document our procedures," Martinez replied with obvious arrogance that demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of prosecutorial oversight. "If you don't stop interfering with our security operations, we'll have to detain you for obstruction of official police business." Rachel continued her prosecutorial documentation while observing the escalating misconduct, understanding that his resistance to legitimate oversight demonstrated exactly the type of institutional problems that required comprehensive legal intervention and potential criminal prosecution for violation of civil rights under color of law. "Officer Martinez, obstruction charges require specific criminal behavior, not legitimate observation of police conduct," Rachel explained with prosecutorial precision. "Your threat of false imprisonment constitutes additional misconduct that will be included in my legal documentation." Other passengers began witnessing the developing confrontation between Rachel's obvious legal expertise and the officer's systematic resistance to oversight, with several travelers expressing concern about the aggressive police conduct. Among the observing passengers were several attorneys who recognized the constitutional violations and police misconduct occurring while understanding that Rachel possessed exceptional knowledge of criminal law that exceeded typical civilian familiarity with law enforcement requirements. As the situation continued to escalate with obvious police misconduct, despite Rachel's prosecutorial intervention, other legal professionals and concerned passengers began providing support for her oversight activities while documenting the systematic law enforcement failures that the officer's conduct represented. Attorney Michael Chen, a criminal defense lawyer who had been observing the police misconduct with growing professional concern, approached the security checkpoint to provide legal support regarding the constitutional violations he was witnessing. "Officers, I'm an attorney specializing in criminal law, and I can confirm that this woman's observations are legally accurate and that your procedures violate established constitutional precedent, Chen announced with professional authority while supporting Rachel's prosecutorial assessment. The Fourth Amendment violations and professional misconduct being documented represent serious legal problems that require immediate corrective action. Martinez and Walsh responded to Chen's legal intervention with defensive law enforcement posturing and increased resistance to professional oversight, apparently prioritizing their authority over constitutional compliance. "Sir, we don't need attorneys telling us how to conduct security operations," Walsh replied with obvious hostility that demonstrated her fundamental misunderstanding of legal oversight and constitutional requirements. "This is a secure area where civilian interference with police operations constitutes potential criminal behavior that we're authorized to address through appropriate law enforcement action." Rachel observed the officer's continued resistance to legitimate oversight while maintaining her prosecutorial documentation of the systematic misconduct. Understanding that such institutional resistance demonstrated comprehensive accountability problems that required immediate administrative and potentially criminal intervention. Officers Martinez and Walsh, your resistance to legitimate oversight and continued constitutional violations are being documented for comprehensive legal review, Rachel stated with prosecutorial authority. These actions will result in administrative investigation and potential criminal charges for violation of civil rights under color of law. More passengers continued to witness the police misconduct while expressing support for Rachel's legal intervention and professional oversight of law enforcement conduct that clearly exceeded appropriate security procedures. Airport Security Supervisor Lisa Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the situation from the security office and was becoming increasingly concerned about the legal implications of her officer's conduct, finally approached the checkpoint with supervisory authority. Supervisor Rodriguez immediately recognized the serious legal implications of her officer's misconduct and resistance to legitimate oversight, understanding that systematic constitutional violations required immediate supervisory intervention and comprehensive accountability measures to prevent significant legal liability. Officers Martinez and Walsh, what is the nature of this situation, and why are you resisting legitimate observation of security procedures? Rodriguez asked with supervisory authority and growing legal concern about the constitutional violations occurring under her administrative oversight. Our departmental policies require constitutional compliance and professional conduct that must be maintained regardless of civilian observation. Martinez attempted to justify his misconduct with explanations that revealed the systematic nature of his professional problems and clear violation of departmental policies that Rachel's prosecutorial office had specifically designed to prevent such law enforcement failures. Supervisor Rodriguez, this woman has been interfering with our security operations and questioning our police procedures in ways that constitute obstruction of official business, Martinez replied with defensive reasoning that demonstrated his continued misunderstanding of legitimate oversight. Rodriguez immediately understood the legal problems that her officer's explanations revealed, recognizing that their conduct represented systematic violations of departmental policy and constitutional law that could result in significant liability. Officers, civilian observation of police conduct is constitutionally protected activity that cannot be characterized as obstruction, Rodriguez explained with supervisory authority. These procedures appear to violate established departmental policies and constitutional requirements. Rachel observed the supervisory intervention while continuing her legal documentation of the systematic misconduct revealed about law enforcement training and accountability. Supervisor Rodriguez, I appreciate your intervention, but these constitutional violations require comprehensive administrative review and potential criminal investigation. Rachel explained with prosecutorial authority. The systematic nature indicates institutional problems that extend beyond individual officer conduct to encompass training and accountability failures. Attorney Chen continued his legal support while preparing for administrative complaints that would result from such clear constitutional violations. These violations are well documented and represent systematic law enforcement problems requiring immediate administrative action and comprehensive policy reform, Chen announced. Understanding the magnitude of constitutional violations and potential legal liability that her officers had created through systematic misconduct, Supervisor Rodriguez immediately implemented damage control measures while beginning the administrative investigation necessary to address the serious law enforcement failures. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for the constitutional violations and professional misconduct that you have witnessed and documented, Rodriguez announced with supervisory authority. We will immediately initiate administrative investigation and implement appropriate corrective measures to address these violations and ensure compliance with constitutional requirements. Rachel accepted the administrative intervention while maintaining her prosecutorial focus and legal documentation of the systematic problems that required comprehensive reform and ongoing oversight. Supervisor Rodriguez, while I appreciate the immediate administrative response, these constitutional violations demonstrate systematic problems with officer training that require comprehensive legal oversight and potential criminal investigation, Rachel replied with prosecutorial authority. The resistance to legitimate oversight indicates institutional problems that extend beyond individual disciplinary measures to encompass comprehensive policy reform. Rodriguez recognized the serious legal implications that Rachel's prosecutorial assessment represented, understanding that comprehensive reform would be necessary to prevent similar constitutional violations and ensure appropriate law enforcement conduct. We are committed to comprehensive administrative review and policy reform to address these institutional problems, Rodriguez stated. Please provide us with your documentation and recommendations for ensuring constitutional compliance throughout our security operations. Rachel prepared to continue her prosecutorial oversight while providing appropriate recommendations for administrative reform that would address the systematic problems. My recommendations will include comprehensive training enhancement, accountability measures, and ongoing prosecutorial oversight to ensure constitutional compliance, Rachel explained. These institutional problems require systematic reform and continuous monitoring to prevent similar violations. Officers Martinez and Walsh observed the administrative intervention with growing awareness of the serious consequences of their constitutional violations, though they remained largely unaware of Rachel's actual position within the criminal justice system. As the administrative investigation continued to develop, Rachel began revealing the depth of her legal expertise and familiarity with law enforcement oversight that would soon transform everyone's understanding of her prosecutorial authority and professional position within the criminal justice system that governed police conduct throughout Miami-Dade County. Supervisor Rodriguez, I want to ensure that you understand the comprehensive legal implications of these constitutional violations and the administrative accountability that will be required, Rachel stated with obvious prosecutorial authority that demonstrated advanced knowledge of criminal law and law enforcement oversight requirements. These violations represent systematic failures in officer training and constitutional compliance that I have extensive professional experience addressing through appropriate legal channels. Rodriguez observed Rachel's detailed knowledge of law enforcement procedures with growing professional recognition that she was dealing with someone whose legal expertise exceeded typical civilian knowledge of police accountability. Ma'am, Your knowledge of our policies suggests significant professional experience with law enforcement oversight and criminal justice administration. Rodriguez replied with supervisory interest and growing respect for Rachel's obvious expertise. Are you perhaps an attorney specializing in criminal law or police accountability who has professional experience with law enforcement agencies? Rachel smiled with prosecutorial confidence while preparing to reveal the criminal justice authority that would completely transform the situation and demonstrate the magnitude of institutional failures that had occurred within her own prosecutorial jurisdiction. Supervisor Rodriguez, I appreciate your recognition of my legal expertise, Rachel replied with growing prosecutorial authority. This situation provides an excellent opportunity for comprehensive administrative review and policy reform that will benefit law enforcement operations and ensure constitutional compliance throughout the airport security system. Officers Martinez and Walsh, who had been observing the administrative discussions with growing awareness of their professional mistakes, finally began to understand the serious legal implications of their constitutional violations and resistance to legitimate prosecutorial oversight. We're beginning to realize that we may have made serious professional mistakes and violated important policies, Martinez said with obvious concern. Rachel maintained her prosecutorial composure while preparing for the revelation that would demonstrate the true scope of institutional failures within the criminal justice system. As Supervisor Rodriguez continued to address the constitutional violations, Rachel began to reveal her actual position within the criminal justice system and the prosecutorial authority that made her the ultimate legal arbiter of police conduct and criminal accountability throughout the entire Miami-Dade County law enforcement structure. Supervisor Rodriguez, I think it's important for you to understand that my interest in this situation extends beyond general legal oversight, Rachel explained with increasing prosecutorial authority. I have comprehensive responsibility for law enforcement accountability and criminal prosecution that makes these constitutional violations particularly concerning from an institutional perspective. Rodriguez observed Rachel's criminal justice language with growing professional recognition that she was dealing with someone whose authority went far beyond typical legal knowledge. Ma'am, your institutional perspective suggests that you may have professional authority within the criminal justice system, Rodriguez replied with supervisory interest and growing awareness of Rachel's potential prosecutorial connection. Are you perhaps a prosecutor who has direct authority over law enforcement accountability and police conduct oversight? Rachel prepared to reveal her actual prosecutorial position that would completely transform everyone's understanding of the situation and demonstrate the magnitude of institutional failures that had allowed such constitutional violations to occur within her own prosecutorial jurisdiction. Supervisor Rodriguez, I appreciate your professional recognition of my criminal justice expertise, Rachel said with growing prosecutorial authority. I believe this situation demonstrates the importance of comprehensive law enforcement training and accountability measures that ensure constitutional compliance throughout police operations. Officers Martinez and Walsh watched the developing criminal justice discussion with increasing anxiety, aware that their constitutional violations had been witnessed by someone with significant prosecutorial authority. We're becoming very concerned about the consequences of our actions and the violations that have occurred, Walsh said with obvious worry. Attorney Chen observed the criminal justice dynamics that Rachel was demonstrating while recognizing that the situation involved someone with exceptional prosecutorial power within the Miami-Dade criminal justice system. The moment Rachel revealed her actual identity as district attorney for Miami-Dade County, the extraordinary scope of her prosecutorial authority became undeniably apparent to everyone involved, as they recognized that the constitutional violations had been witnessed by the chief prosecutor responsible for criminal charges and law enforcement accountability throughout the entire metropolitan area. Supervisor Rodriguez, Officers Martinez and Walsh, and everyone present, Rachel announced with full prosecutorial authority. I am Rachel Thompson, District Attorney for Miami-Dade County, with comprehensive responsibility for all criminal prosecutions, law enforcement oversight, and police accountability throughout this metropolitan area. The revelation created immediate shock among all law enforcement personnel who understood that they had been displaying constitutional violations directly in front of their chief prosecutor, who possessed the authority to file criminal charges and implement career-ending disciplinary measures. Supervisor Rodriguez stood frozen with complete professional devastation as she realized that the constitutional violations had been witnessed by the district attorney responsible for all law enforcement oversight and criminal prosecution within their jurisdiction. District Attorney Thompson, I am profoundly embarrassed about the institutional failures and constitutional violations that have occurred under my administrative oversight, Rodriguez said with supervisory remorse. This situation represents exactly the type of police misconduct that your office has worked to eliminate through comprehensive training and accountability programs. Officers Martinez and Walsh realized with complete professional horror that their constitutional violations had been directed against the district attorney, who possessed the authority to file criminal charges and end their law enforcement careers, understanding that their actions represented career-ending violations of the constitutional standards that Rachel's office had established. District Attorney Thompson, we cannot express how sorry we are for our constitutional violations and complete failure to recognize your prosecutorial authority, Martinez said with obvious fear. We understand the serious criminal justice consequences of our actions and the violation of everything that law enforcement represents regarding constitutional compliance. Rachel maintained her prosecutorial composure while addressing the systematic institutional problems that the incident had revealed within Miami-Dade law enforcement operations. This situation demonstrates that despite comprehensive prosecutorial oversight and training programs, we still have systematic problems with constitutional compliance and law enforcement accountability that require immediate attention and comprehensive reform, she explained with prosecutorial authority. This is why truth always comes to light, and justice always finds its way. If this story shows you that dignity and respect matter more than assumptions, make sure you subscribe to see more stories where justice prevails. Because when we stand together against discrimination, we make real change happen. Following the extraordinary revelation and demonstration of how constitutional violations could occur even under direct prosecutorial oversight, Miami-Dade County immediately initiated sweeping reforms to law enforcement training programs, constitutional compliance monitoring, and police accountability measures that would ensure systematic elimination of misconduct throughout the metropolitan law enforcement system. Officers Martinez and Walsh were immediately suspended pending criminal investigation and faced potential prosecution for civil rights violations under color of law, while all airport security personnel were required to complete enhanced constitutional law training that emphasized zero tolerance for misconduct, regardless of civilian oversight. The incident became a catalyst for statewide discussions about law enforcement accountability and the importance of comprehensive prosecutorial oversight that extended beyond training programs to include systematic monitoring and criminal consequences for officers who violated constitutional requirements. Rachel's prosecutorial response became a model for effective criminal justice oversight, as her comprehensive reform program was adopted throughout Florida and inspired other prosecutors to strengthen their police accountability systems. Within weeks of the incident, Miami International Airport had implemented new constitutional compliance systems that would prevent similar violations and ensure appropriate recognition of civilian rights regardless of law enforcement assumptions, while establishing Rachel's prosecutorial office as national leader in police accountability and constitutional compliance enforcement. The transformation extended beyond individual law enforcement agencies to influence broader conversations about prosecutorial responsibility for police misconduct and the critical importance of comprehensive criminal justice oversight that ensured actual constitutional compliance rather than mere policy development that failed to eliminate systematic violations. Criminal justice organizations recognized the incident as a powerful example of how constitutional violations could persist despite oversight, and used Rachel's experience to develop enhanced accountability measures that would ensure effective elimination of police misconduct through systematic prosecution. Rachel's story became an inspiring example of how prosecutorial authority could create positive institutional change while demonstrating the ongoing importance of constitutional vigilance and comprehensive police accountability that protected all citizens from law enforcement misconduct, regardless of their position within the criminal justice system. The lasting impact extended far beyond Miami-Dade County to influence how prosecutors approached police accountability, with Rachel's enforcement framework becoming a model for effective law enforcement oversight that ensured actual protection of constitutional rights through systematic monitoring and comprehensive criminal justice accountability. But Rachel's story is just one example of how prosecutorial accountability meets police misconduct. Next video. Watch what happens when a Black luxury hotel owner's 20-year secret is revealed during airport accommodation discrimination. When staff question her right to premium service, the most shocking hospitality empire credentials in travel history emerge. You won't believe what happens when business ownership meets service bias. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications for new content. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story moved you, and share your thoughts and opinions about this situation in the comments below.